Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Judge Maldonado, for being here. When we look at the work of a federal district judge, it's a busy docket. One has a lot of motions to follow and to stay on top of. Some of the motions that end up taking a lot of time are on the civil docket side of things, motions for summary judgment. In your view, what's worse, when you've got a close case, to grant a non-meritorious dispositive motion or a Rule 56 summary judgment motion, or to fail to grant a motion for summary judgment where it is warranted? In a close case, which one is worse, or is either worse?
Thank you, Senator Lee. So I am very careful with motions for summary judgment because I respect the role of the jury. And I think it is rather arrogant for me to decide there's no disputed issue of material fact. And so I inherited, I don't know, tens and tens of motions for summary judgment, and I take those very seriously because I don't want to take someone's day in court away from them and usurp the role of the jury. Sure. So those are the most time-consuming motions that I have before me. And just to clarify, when I received my reassignment, many motions that I received were from 2020, 2021, and so I had to triage and have a pipeline and decide the oldest first, and that was sort of my plan of attack, to decide those older motions first.
Okay, that's helpful to know. So it sounds like you may have gotten assigned some dogs when you arrived. It happens sometimes with the newly arrived judge. It's sort of a hazing ritual among some judges. Well, the reason I ask about the dispositive motion issue is that there's a natural tendency among judges, including federal district judges, to want to not face the more difficult decision whenever they can avoid it. It is more difficult to grant a motion for summary judgment than it is to deny one. And you're subject to appeal much more quickly, more likely to get reversed, and if you deny it, the parties might well settle and call that trial by attrition. It's a list of paradoxes that exist in the court, in the judicial system. On the one hand, justice delayed is justice denied. On the other hand, as evidenced by the turtles on display in the courtyards at the Supreme Court across the street, sometimes the deliberative process needs to be deliberate and it needs to be slow-paced. And so those tensions have to be managed. But the risk we run into is the judge looking for ways, perhaps, to minimize the judge's exposure to being overturned on appeal and the workload. Granting the motion for summary judgment requires you to write an opinion or order, which takes time and can be immediately appealed. Now, of these cases that you've got, I think it's 125 pending motions that you've got, ranking you as number 1 in the Seventh Circuit, number 7 in the nation. There are some that are troubling, some that including one that was filed by a prisoner. This is not complex multi-district litigation involving huge mega corporations. There's one, for example, that's been fully briefed since November 2021, for 3.5 years nearly. We call this a fully ripe motion for summary judgment. The prisoner in this case filed the case complaining that he's, while in prison, suffering extreme tooth pain. It's apparently going unaddressed while he's in prison. They've done everything they can to get it teed up. It's fully briefed, it's before you, and just last month the plaintiff submitted another status report request of the court, and your response was, quote, "The court has taken defendant's motions under advisement and will endeavor to rule on both in the near future." What does that mean here, endeavor to rule? And what more would you need to rule on a case of that relative simplicity in less than 3.5 years?
Thank you, Senator. So do you happen to know the name of that case?
We can get that for you.
Okay. So there is a triage process that I follow in my chambers. We're generally working on the oldest motions, and I think reading what you just wrote, listening to what you just read to me, I think this means it's in the immediate pipeline, meaning that it's in the top, 10 things that are immediately going to be issued. Now, I am a very involved judge. I edit every single thing that goes out of my chambers, and so oftentimes and I go back and forth with my law clerks on drafts. It's not sometimes the most rapid process,
But does this case ring a bell? Do you recognize?
If I knew the name, it's probably with all my law clerks. We have our list of things that we're working on, our pipeline, which has to be based somewhat on chronology. So you mentioned November 2021. I wasn't even on the bench yet. And so that came to me almost a year old.
Right.
And that wasn't even one of the oldest.
It was fully ripe before you became a judge. And
a year before I became a judge.
And I understand that sometimes new judges, part of this hazing ritual that I described, get assigned dogs, get assigned a long list of cases with pending dispositive motions. I understand that happens. But we will get that information to you. I raise it simply because it is very important that we not drag those out. At some point, it becomes trial by attrition, and the parties lose a lot when justice is delayed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Lee.